G'day guys, Mankey with the Outer Circle, and welcome to Getting Started in Horus Heresy. Today, the 11th Legion. Alright, we're not actually going to look at the 11th Legion because we don't know anything about them really. So, why the 11th Legion when we still haven't done Space Wolves? Well, that's easy. I just put a poll up on our page today. I said, who wants to know about either the 11th Legion or the Space Wolves when we do this episode? And Space Wolves narrowly lost. There's only a few votes in it. So, looks like Space Wolves can wait for a little while longer yet. Today we're looking at the Legion Blackshields. Why the Blackshields? Well, when we did the second Legion, the way I covered it was from a generic Legion standpoint. As in, hey, let's just collect something generic, not tied to any faction, but you could easily include units from other factions into it to create a Legion of your choosing at a later date. Well, I thought for the 11th Legion, it would make sense to do sort of the same thing. I could have gone for Shattered Legions, but I think it's best to wait until we've done all of the Legions before we do that, because then we'll at least have those Legions in the back of our mind when we come to it. So, alright, Blackshields. What are Blackshields, first of all? So, when we think of 40k, we kind of think there's Space Marines and there's Chaos Space Marines. And in 30k, we also think that. We go, oh, there's Horus's side and there's the Imperial side. Well, these are the guys who are sort of trapped in the middle. Some of them will fight for the War Master, some are fighting for the Imperium, but they're basically masters to themselves. They could be loose conglomerations of Marines who've linked up in a Shattered Legion format, and they've come up with their own tactics. They could be members of a Legion who went off separate from their Legion for so long they've become their own entity. And basically, they're a force that you can do with whatever you will feel like. That's what's great about them. And because they don't use that sort of standard Legion format for all of their units, you can sort of pretend that they are the 11th Legion, one of the lost legions, as it were. With that, you lose pretty much all of your Legiones Astartes rules, because you're no longer the Legions. Instead, you gain the options given to you by what they call Wrought by War, which it basically is a set of special rules, and you get to pick one of the 4 options, or even none if you're an idiot. So, first of all, you have the Orphans of War. And the idea is that basically everyone in the army gains +1 leadership. You get to reroll 1s to hit in the shooting and assault phases when you're within 6 inches of a friendly unit, and that friendly unit has more than 5 models in it. But you don't get to benefit from the leadership of other models, and if you fail a morale check in the assault phase, you automatically just lose D3 models, and then you might potentially get run down anyway. So the characters gain preferred enemy towards enemy characters, and they have another rule called No Gods, No Masters, in which you can't take chaplains or agents of the Imperium. So that's guys like Nathaniel Garrow, Talos Rubio, Melchador's agents. Next is the Outlanders. Now, the Outlanders is a bit of a weird one. So, first of all, you got Void Reaver's special rule, which is up to half of your infantry, which don't have dedicated transports, can be deployed via Deep Strike. But if they suffer mishaps, they lose D3 models in addition to any other effect. Sensing a pattern here, they get access to unsanctioned weaponry, so instead of taking combi bolters, they may take Xeno's Deathlocks, which are a weapon we'll come to later, but it does cost points. Cool fact though, can buy characters with red grenades. That would be sergeants of units as well, because they are classified as a character. You can also do other little things with them, but it's not really important. They have a special rule called the Shadow of Oblivion, in which you have to count up a number of different units in your army and let the opponent know. Once half of your units are either destroyed or falling back, for the rest of the game you basically have to take a leadership test or remove the units you have left from play. Pretty brutal. It's kind of similar to the way the Lord of the Rings works with their morale, but yeah, not the best. Outlanders and Orphans of War, they're not the greatest. Death Seekers is definitely an improved one of the 4 rules. With Death Seekers, units become immune to pain. All of your units with the Legiones Astartes Blackshields rule get 6+ feel no pain, become immune to pinning, and you don't take morale checks from shooting casualties. So essentially the same rules as the Iron Warriors. They also have a rule called the Lure of Battle. You cannot voluntarily fail morale checks, and if you attempt to move your units further away from the enemy than they were when you started the turn, you have to take a leadership test. And if you fail that, you actually have to move d6 inches towards the nearest enemy. Situational, but can be used against you. Otherwise, pretty strong. Lastly, we get to the Chimerae, and 99.99% of the time when people play Blackshields, they gravitate towards the Chimerae, because the Chimerae is just better. All your units get +1 strength, +1 toughness, but you drop to initiative 3. Well, actually it's -1 initiative, so your HQs will generally be initiative 4 still. And if they're using things like Thunderhammers or Power Fists, they're going to be fighting initiative 1 anyway, so it's not really a big deal. Now, any charge or run distances that you have to perform, that's at the -1 initiative, and you don't get to sweeping advance. You lose a little bit of mobility. You also gain +1 weapon skill and ballistic skill, but -2 leadership. So they're the 2 options. Be tougher, or be better at shooting and close combat. The thing is, you got to apply it to everyone. So while the +1 weapon skill and ballistic skill would be awesome on like a heavy weapons team, not going to be so good for the rest of your army. But +1 strength and toughness pretty much always comes in handy. So that's the one people just gravitate towards. Also, you gain fear, you gain fleet, and you get rage. But the army suffers -1 ballistic skill and must always sweeping advance. So that's the third option. Again, not really taken, because +1 toughness, +1 strength, and -1 initiative, who cares? It is so strong. Downside, can't take an allied detachment. But allies don't really like you anyway. If you want to ally with the legions, for example, with any Blackshields, it's by the Emperor's command, which is basically the equivalent of no fucking way, only because we absolutely have to, and so units distrust one another, they can't claim each other's objectives, can't use characters or buffs from each faction. Long short of it is, if you're playing Blackshields, you probably just want to take Chimerae, and you probably want to take +1 strength, +1 toughness. Unless you're really into the game and really know what you're doing, in which case, why are you watching this series? +1 strength, +1 toughness, it's such a beginner's army, and it's strong. So, yeah. Now, other downsides. Limited resources. Thanks to being Blackshields and outside of that Imperial or Warmaster supply chain, you don't get some of the cool shit. Can't take a rite of war. You can't use Praetors, Command Squads, Tactical Squads, Drop Pods, Dreadnought Drop Pods, or Deathstorm Drop Pods. You only get a single type of console, except for Centurions, because the console is actually an upgrade to a Centurion. So technically you have 3 Centurions in your army, if you so wanted. But the minute you turn one of them into a Librarian or a Chaplain, that kind of thing, that's it, you use the slot. You may never have more units with a vehicle type than the infantry type, but dedicated transports do not count towards this limit. So you can use this to your advantage. Now, I know this is a very long-winded intro to Blackshields, and they are a very complicated faction on the surface, but believe me, once you get the rules sort of drilled into your head, real easy. Now, they have different types of war gear, basically pariah war gear it's known as. You can get a weaker version of power armor, but it allows you to run faster, attack faster, that kind of thing. You can get weaker version of bolt guns, for example, they're range 16, assault 2 instead. but if you charge after you fire it counts as disordered. Pariah Flamers, Strength 3 Flamer, and if you want you can over-pressurize it, becomes a Strength 4 Flamer, and I think it gets the Torrent rule. But it pretty much counts as a plasma weapon, so, you know, -1 to your, roll a 1 and you overheat, that kind of thing. Basically, they're pretty mediocre. Not many people go for it. You do have the option of taking las guns, auto guns, las locks, or a Xeno's Deathlock, which is a really weird weapon. Sort of an unreliable weapon. My advice is to only take 2 or 3 of them if you do take them in a unit, because the more you have, the more chance you have of hurting your unit. The rules are basically written in such a way that 1 or 2 are good, 3 is serviceable, but once you get up to like 5 of them, the chances of actually fucking up your own unit make it not worthwhile taking. So again, not going to really cover off on that, it's just not worth it. If we revisit Blackshields at a later date and cover off on each of the 4 factions one by one, do a really in-depth look at them, maybe. But right now, for the person getting into it who just wants to have this crazy strong list for 30k, yeah, don't worry about it. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Praetor option is basically removed from your army. Gets replaced with what they call the Reaver Lord. Now, the Reaver Lord, pretty much a Praetor, doesn't have access to the same weapons or armor unless you pay a premium in points. That said, has access to other weapons that replace them. So instead of Paragon Blades, you get Halo Blades. You can get a Cyber Familiar, which would normally be something only Iron Hands could take. Halo Blades are worth pointing out because they're a Strength plus 3, AP 3, two-handed weapon. But not too bad. On the right unit, such as a Chimera Lord, you're going to be striking at Strength 8, AP 3. All you got to do is cause 1 wound on most Praetors and you're going to instantly kill them. So it doesn't matter if they've got instant death on a roll of a 6, you just got to wait for them to roll a 1 on their armor save, and chances are they're going to be rolling like 3 armor saves. So it's like a 50% chance of getting an instant kill on a Praetor. Where the Reaver Lord becomes particularly nasty is if you're Chimera, you have a bike, and you happen to have an Iron Halo and a Cyber Familiar. Because chances are you're going to be rocking around at toughness 6. Yeah. And if you're on a Scimitar jet bike, well, 2+ armor save, you don't even have to pay for that invulnerable save. Oh, sorry, the 2+ armor save. You still got to pay for the invulnerable. My bad. Yeah, Reaver Lords, really good, but the points can stack up incredibly fast on them, so you got to use them wisely. As for the other unit types available to you, there's a special character called the Nemean Reaver. He becomes an agent of Malkador, the Sigillite, and he is ridiculously fucking strong, like Sigismund levels of strong. But again, special character, not something you really want to be starting out with, something to look at down the track, and most narrative events will say no to using him. So again, not going to cover off on him, just know that he is very strong. And the Black Shield Marauders. So these guys replace your tactical squads. You get a 5 to 20 strong squad, very customizable. You can pick a whole different range of weapons. You give everyone gigantic 2-handed heavy chainswords. You could give them all things like flamers and stuff like that. And actually, can I take a couple of flamers? I lie. They can take shotguns, laslocks, bolt guns, all sorts of stuff you can do with them. Plus, you can take them in small squads, so you can take a lot of squads and spread them right out. Completely up to you what you do with them. So yeah, Blackshields, highly customizable, adds up very, very fast when it comes to points. So from here, let's try and look at the actual units themselves and figure out how to make an army of Blackshields. So, first thing I want to start with is the Sons of Horus Legion Command. The whole spiked armor and the fact that they're not incredibly covered in Sons of Horus iconography, Like, basically just cut the emblems off the shoulder pads. Bam. Anyone can use these guys. Plus, they look fucking cool in general, right? Blackshields are sort of, with the black in the name and that kind of thing, I imagine a more sinister type of force. They're not a happy-go-lucky Legionnaires force. These guys are fighting brutal guerrilla campaigns. They've got no allies. They take no prisoners. And with that in mind, I think these guys make a pretty good command squad. There's nothing wrong with saying that the Malagos model here can't use that weapon as a Halo Blade, that kind of thing. You could use the other character as a Herald console. So, a couple of options available to you. But neither here nor there. Instead, look at the Betrayal at Kelth box. The Betrayal at Kelth box comes with a heap of tactical marines, who do come with the right equipment on their sprues to make your basic Blackshields Reavers. Because again, can't take tactical marines. Instead, you can take a whole squad of guys armed with close combat weapons, pistols and bolt guns as basic troops. Put them in rhinos, suddenly you have a very effective threat force. And you can even sort of spam the land raiders, and if you can get them as dedicated transports, then you're really starting to win. You get Terminators, you get a Contemptor, you get Power Armour, and you get the Chaplain and the Terminator consoles. So, again, think of a Chimera Terminator. Toughness 5, 4+ invulnerable with Cataphracti. Maybe you could use one of your console slots to put a Primus Medicae in there and give the unit feel no pain. Now you're talking a very, very tough unit. Toughness 5 Terminators with 4+ invols are not something to laugh at. Again, I'm not saying you have to, just options. If you want to spend a little more money, want to accessorize your Reavers, or maybe you want a particular look, World Eaters Rampages, which are a Legion specific unit, or Sons of Horus Reavers, work really well as Blackshields Reavers, because they're armed with appropriate crazy weapons, or they even just make interesting squad leaders. Perhaps you'd shave off some of this Sons of Horus iconography, or maybe you choose to leave it on. Maybe they're dedicated to the War Master, but they don't serve him as such. Again, the fluff with Blackshields is very malleable. Don't feel like you have to use the same sort of armor throughout these forces. Don't feel like you're locked into using Mark IV power armor or Mark III power armor. Blackshields is such a loose conglomeration, you can use pretty much any kind of armor. As long as they have the same paint scheme on them, by the way, don't use 40k armor, that's taking it too far. It'll work just fine, because they're a loose coalition of units that have been sort of forged together by the war. So yeah, Reavers, that kind of thing, make really good squad sergeants in these situations. As I mentioned before, Chimera, which is the one that most people are going to go for, +1 strength, +1 toughness, brutally strong on jet bikes and bikes. When your units have toughness 6, it just changes the game completely. And if you want to take it to extremes, which you can, a Praevian console with something like Castellax, the Legionaries Astartes rule is replaced by the Blackshields rule. So they should get the Chimera rule transferred to them, giving them +1 strength, not that it really matters, but also +1 toughness, so they will be toughness 8 at all times, which is just terrifying, because bolt guns can't hurt them, troops in close combat can't hurt them, you become reliant on crack grenades and melter bombs and that kind of thing. Lastly, when it comes to building up your infantry forces, you get to the armour. You can take tanks and vehicles, but you're basically limited to 1 tank per infantry unit. This makes things difficult, because, well, a squadron has 3 vehicles in it. You could potentially take 9 Predators in heavy support if you're a bit of an interesting character. Not the greatest thing for you to do. Basically, it's not looking after you in any way, shape or form to have that many vehicles, and the fact is you would need at least 9 infantry squads to support it. So my advice is just to choose wisely. I wouldn't take a Sicarian Omega, for example, they're not a great unit, even if they look good. The Sicarian battle tanks, yeah, the Punisher, the regular Sicarian, Venator, Arcus, all good choices, but the Plasma one is just terrible. The Deredeo gives that fantastic anti-aircraft firepower, and if he's got the las cannons, then fantastic anti-tank firepower. Maybe you want to get a Land Raider squadron, something to transport those strong units you've got around with. Again, toughness 5 Terminators jumping out of a Proteus, I'm going to be fucking terrified of that if I've got to face it, because I've got to crack the Land Raiders and then I've got to kill a unit hopping out of it. That's incredibly tough. And unlike other legions, for example, that may have like Gorgon Terminators or Red Butchers or Sekhmet, where you pay sort of a points premium, you're getting stock cost Terminators at toughness 5. You don't have to spend any extra investment of points on them. So again, fucking brutal. You could also take things like the Land Raider Achilles for sort of that heavy firepower, or even an artillery squadron. Is it sort of the best choices? Well, that's up to you. It's up to how you plan your list. The Damocles might be really good if you're picking a list which has a deep strike capability, because of the no scatter deep strike zone. Again, you've got to make it up as you go, but my advice is to just wisely pick the units that accentuate what you lack. For example, if you can't kill power armor, maybe pick tanks and vehicles which can kill power armor. If you struggle when you face, say, Terminators, again, pick vehicles which can hurt Terminators. Units like the Vindicator, units like the Medusa. Solid options if you're going to be facing Terminators. But if you think you're going to be facing Solar Auxilia or something like that, Whirlwind Scorpius, Basilisk, units that can shoot over fortifications behind Aegis defense lines, that kind of thing may come in real handy. So there's a lot of options open to you when it comes to vehicles. The problem is not blowing your wad on them. The strongest lists you can make, and very beginner friendly lists, is basically a list that focuses around using these Betrayal at Health infantry, supported by Terminators, and then some kind of fast bike units, using the Chimerae Blackshields rules with +1 strength and +1 toughness, because it will make these units insanely strong and hit very hard. The HQ options, you don't even have to spend on resin. Blackshields can be a very cheap army for you if you play it wisely and you purchase the right stuff. Anyway, when it comes to decals, that's one last little thing which I didn't cover off on, so I'll quickly open it up now. But there is a set of decals available for the Blackshields, and it's actually really good. I myself have a set, used it extensively. Some of the icons I even used on my 1000 Suns, because they kind of work. They're these very occult, non-sort of Legion specific symbols. So yeah, works well for everyone. This here is the Legiones Astartes Blackshields transfer sheet. Looks lovely, doesn't it? So you've got a range of different icons to pick from. Obviously they're different forces, but there's nothing to stop you using all these icons in the one army. As long as they've sort of got a consistent scheme, each unit could have their own icon. They could be a group of Blackshields warbands with similar attributes that have linked up together. One of the great things about them, you can basically do whatever you want with them. And, as you can see, looks great. This is one particular colour scheme, of course. This is nice and simple for the new player. Paint a tank black, dry brush some highlights on with grey, put a couple of decals on, bam. That is about as simple as you can possibly fucking make an army. Same thing with the infantry. Here they've got a hint of blue, maybe they were once Ultramarines, maybe they were once World Eaters, you don't know. These guys have the same sort of thing going on. They're just black, a little bit of sponged on silvers, and some nice decals to break it up. It's really that easy. So Blackshields, really complicated sounding rules, really simple in practice. Don't use allies, don't use a couple of units that you would otherwise like, but you're not crippled by it. They're strong, they're simple, easy to paint, the transfers have a really good sheet, one of the best factions you can honestly play with Legiones Astartes. Anyway, I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Thanks all for watching this much more convoluted episode of Getting Started in Horus Heresy. I'll see you all next time.